Today, our spooky theme and final theme of the month is murderers and serial killers. So, welcome to the Pandemic Pinup Happy Hour. Today, I thought I would share my love for crime, documentaries, and the fascination with the psychology behind people that commit certain acts, and cocktails, and my love for horror movies, and just put them all in one class, because why not? So I picked three movies that I very much enjoy for different reasons, and then tried to stay within a realm of movies that were based on actual murderers that existed at some point in time. So we're going to learn a little bit of criminal history. We're going to learn how to make some cocktails, and then we're going to crawl inside the chef corner of my brain for this very over-the-top chef-style cocktail today. So I'm really excited. So first, I'll tell you what movies we're going to be making cocktails to. That would be the original Scream. Leatherface is the character in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Definitely prefer the OG one from like the 70s, I think it is, to the newer versions. And also Silence of the Lambs, which is one of my favorite movies, also part of one of my favorite crime trilogies. And we'll be focusing on Hannibal Lecter, which I know sounds like obvious. However, most of that movie was, or at least Silence of the Lambs, was about Buffalo Bill, not actually Hannibal Lecter. So he actually has very little screen time in the movie. I think it's like 16 minutes or like 22 minutes total. But surprisingly, he's one of the most memorable things about that movie. Or maybe not surprisingly, it is Anthony Hopkins. So as we're going through these, I'll tell you a little bit about the movie, why I like it, the murderers that or killers that inspired it, and then about the cocktail, because that's what we all come here for, is to make drinks. So we'll start off with something I like to call, making sure, if you are tuning in on Facebook, please be sure to drop any questions you have in the comment section. I'm trying to check it out on both sides. But the first one I like to do is a cocktail I'm calling I'll Be Right Back. So one of the reasons I love Scream as a movie is because there is so much more complex than a lot of people realize. I actually rewatched it yesterday just to kind of refresh it in my mind. But there's that first opening scene with Drew Barrymore where she's super young, like dark eyebrows, dark lipstick, but blonde hair. And she's making Jiffy Pop on one of those old school phones that have the charger. And the killer ends up murdering her and stringing her up from a tree, and she's found by her parents. If you are at any point uncomfortable, you can just get these recipes from the Instagram account and not have to listen to all this murder stuff. But in that movie, there is a lot of work being done to bring up tropes that happen in classic horror movies or slasher films where if you are a virgin, then you usually make it to the end of the movie. But if you sin in any way, like you drink, you do drugs, you have sex, then usually you're going to die. So things like that. Plus, there's a ton of references about other horror movies. And it's just so well written. I don't know how people can't like it. It is a little cheesy and a little bit of slasher film. It is from the 90s. But you should give it a watch. Like one of my favorite things is Jamie, I think it's Jamie Kennedy, if anybody even remembers who that is. He's in this scene watching the movie Halloween that has Jason in it, but the main character, the actress's name is Jamie. And so he keeps telling her in the movie to look behind him when the murderer is also right behind him. So it's very complex, but you should watch the movie. It's really good. It's very interesting, I think. And it's based off of a murderer named Danny Rowling from Gainesville, Florida, who in the 90s killed 8 college students, primarily female, but he did kill 8 college students. And that's kind of where the inspiration from the Ghostface killer in Scream came from. Usually only attacked college kids that ended up being their friends that attacked them. But yeah, so in tribute to that movie, one of the things you're never supposed to say in a horror movie, or if you're caught in a situation like that, is, I'll be right back, because you definitely won't. You will definitely die. So here's a cocktail called I'll Be Right Back. In true college fashion, it's kind of like an old school or new school Long Island iced tea. So this cocktail is a shaken cocktail, but it is really hefty. So you can feel free to just mix it in the glass. Most Long Island iced teas are mixed in the glass. I like to shake mine just to aerate the juice a little bit. And if you try this and like it, I wanted to show you how to kind of batch the ingredients ahead of time to make your life easier. This would make a phenomenal punch if you're having a Halloween party this year. So I'm gonna use 3 ounces of Ceylon black tea. Always thought it's kind of weird that Long Island iced tea doesn't have actual tea in it. Kind of one of my pet peeves. So we're gonna use 3 ounces of tea, and this is a really large drink. If you do wanna make this on a lower scale because it has a lot of alcohol in it, let me know and I'll adjust the ratios for you because it's not as easy as just halving it. But we can dial it back about like 25%. Then this cocktail has a blend of spirits. Much like the Long Island iced tea, it's going to have gin, vodka, tequila, and then our 4th one is going to be pear liqueur. A lot of Long Island iced teas have orange liqueur in them or triple sec. I decided to switch it out, make it a little more seasonal. So I've already blended my ratios here. I know it looks clear, but this is tequila, gin, vodka, pear liqueur. And the ratios are equal across the board. So for the cocktail, you'll need a 3/4 ounce of gin, 3/4 ounce of vodka, 3/4 ounce of tequila, and a 3/4 ounce of pear liqueur. So I will be using 3 ounces of my mix. And then I made this juice blend that I'm calling a Grappling Cordial. And I know that sounds really fancy or foreign, but it's literally just parts of the names of all of the fruits that are involved put into a sentence. So it's got grapefruit, it's got pomegranate, it's got lemon, and it's got lime. So I call it Grappling. But it's this really nice juice. I made this, fell in love with it, been drinking it with vodka sodas, and a bunch of other things as well. But for this cocktail, we're going to be using 2 1/4 ounces of this cordial. And the recipe for this cordial is on the flyer that I put out for the class earlier this week. So if you're new here, just so you know, at the beginning of every week, I put out a little flyer. It tells you what to expect, what to buy, what to prepare ahead of time if you'd like to mix along. So we have all of that booze, our tea, and our juice blend in this shaker. I'm gonna add a little bit of ice, not a ton. I just wanna kind of aerate it, but it's gonna be served over crushed ice, so I'm not too worried about it being hyper cold. And then I'm gonna shake it for about 10 to 15 seconds. All right, and just because I wanted to try something a little quirky, I found these really neat little popcorn holders at my local dollar store. So this is my cup. Look how big that is. I didn't want to measure it because I thought I would be very discouraged using this, but I'm pretty sure it can hold over 16 ounces. We're going to see. I think this is going to be a little too little for this, but we'll find out. I'm going to fill this with my favorite kind of ice, Pebble Ice from Sonic. It is my life. I love it so much. So, put some of that in my cup. All right, so I've got that full of ice. I'm going to go ahead and strain my cocktail over my ice. Oh, it's actually pretty close. It's not bad. I don't know if y'all can see, but it's too hot here, so it's not bad. So my recommendation for serving, first and foremost, you will need a straw, a big deep cocktail. And I would garnish this with a knife to make it extra spooky, which I will be for the photo for later. Also, that's the weapon of choice of Ghostface Killer in Scream. And I'm gonna serve it with a side of Jiffy Pop. So this is a really long drink with a lot of kick to it, but it will get you through the movie or maybe half of the movie and some popcorn. So I hope you guys watch it, rent it, buy it, whatever it is. Watch Scream, have this cocktail, and then let me know what you think. So that is, I'll be right back. And if you drink probably 2 of these, you definitely will not be back. You'll be in bed until tomorrow. So moving on our murder spree of the day, we're going to do something that I like to call Mad and Macabre. So Mad and Macabre is a cocktail that I came up with based off of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I love this movie. It's very, I feel like unnecessarily over the top, just because like who's just gonna run after a bunch of people with a heavy chainsaw and then slice them up? Like it just doesn't seem efficient to me. If I was ever going to kill somebody, it would be like that. But it was a very interesting read to really dive into how the movie was made. They had no budget. They were in the middle of nowhere in Texas in the summer, even though in theory this movie takes place later in the year. So it was super hot. They went days where they didn't get fed. They didn't have any AC. They didn't have hydration. People got sick. And none of the people in the movie made very much money off of it, even though the movie made a ton of money. Because the company that made the movie then sold it and just kind of gave everybody like a check for working on it. So they got none of the royalties. But it was an iconic horror movie. It's been remade a ton of times. Plus, it takes place in Texas. Fun fact, you can actually go to a restaurant that is in the town where it was filmed. And there is an Airbnb version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house that you can rent out. I actually know someone who rented it out last year for a bachelor party. That was a little bit of a weird choice, but you know, whatever rocks your boat. So for Mad and Macabre, I wanted to create a cocktail that you could build in glass, just make it easy, because this movie is anything but easy. So it's not easy to digest, it wasn't easy to make, so I wanted something easy to drink along with it. So we're gonna make a type of highball, and I wanted to bring in some seasonal flavors. As you stick with me through November, we'll be kind of exploring a whole new branch of flavors because you know summer's over, fall is getting here, even though it's kind of still trying to make up its mind here in Texas. But for this cocktail, I took Aperol, which is one of my favorite citrus spirits or bitter liqueurs, and I infused it with dried red currants. Again, if you're new, the infusion times, the ratios, measurements, all of that is on the flyer that I put out. So into my glass, I am going to put 1.5 ounces of my currant infused Aperol liqueur. And then we're going to be using a dry white vermouth. I tried this cocktail with sweet white vermouth and just sweet red vermouth. They all work. So if you don't have this on hand, but you have the others, go ahead and make it. But I thought that the dry vermouth was the best combination. So 1.5 ounces of this. So equal parts. And then I'm going to add some pebble ice because I love it. And I'm going to get my cocktail spoon, just give it a nice quick little stir. And then we're going to add some soda. This is some regular club soda, nothing fancy. You could also do sparkling mineral water if that's your preference. I'm using about 2, maybe 3 ounces. If you want to shoot in the middle, 2.5 is my preferred ratio if I'm actually measuring it out. But when you mix in a glass, you want to stir, but also pull up is what it's called when you pull up. And that'll help those flavors kind of combine and make one solid drink. And then I wanted to make leather-ish type of garnish. So Leatherface, the killer in the movie, was inspired by Ed Gein, who is a notorious serial killer. He killed, I believe, in theory, it was 2 women, but he also victimized 9 dead women. But he was known for making furniture out of the skin of his victims. This is also part of the inspiration for Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. But Leatherface, if you actually watch the movie, you can see things in the house that are made from like human skin and stuff. So I thought we can't have Leatherface, we can't talk about Ed Gein and all of his crazy shenanigans or nonsense without actually making leather. So I made fruit leather. I'm not gonna put actual leather into a cocktail. But so I took a splash of Aperol and blended some peaches and added a little honey, just those 3 ingredients. And I made a bunch of fruit leather. And I made mine really, really thin because I thought it looked more interesting for the cocktail. But you can make it a little thicker and not cook it as long so that it's rollable, much like a fruit roll up. But I liked it like this because it's kind of crispy, but also kind of leathery in texture. So that is the cocktail, Mad and Macabre. Put that over to the side. So, hoping you're still with me. Somehow my Facebook thing got turned off. Let me go back. So now we're going to crawl into my chef brain. So I'm a chef first, bartender second. Kitchen was always my first love, and it's sometimes really nice to be behind the bar because it's like being a chef in a much quicker, condensed fashion. It's usually less ingredients. They go into a glass. It's an immediate serve. So it's really nice. However, sometimes I like to overthink things and get super crazy and think of like, if I could take this dish and make it into a cocktail, how would I do that? So I love Silence of the Lambs. I love the character of Hannibal Lecter. Obviously, he's not a good guy, but he's a very interesting character. He's so poised, so educated, and he gets away with so much. And the character, the way he acts, the way he carries himself was based off of not serial killer, just murderer. I think it's Alfredo. Yeah, Alfredo Bali Trevino, who was actually a Mexican doctor in the 50s. And he got into a quarrel with his lover at the time and then split the man's throat and ended up in prison. But Alfredo was also a doctor and very educated, and that inspired the Hannibal Lecter character. I noticed recently that the show Hannibal has made it to Netflix, and some people are discovering it for the first time. For me, I am rewatching it because I love it. And I love the food styling. It is literal food porn, but it's also got all these murderous things to it because you're looking at these delicious dishes and it's being implied that they're being made with human people or human body parts. Human people is the same thing. But they had one of the most amazing chefs in the world, Jose Andres, help with the styling of that show, and that is why it is so spectacular. So I went through all of the dishes that are made on the new food-centric style of Hannibal. And one of the dishes that stood out to me was the Sanguinacho Donche. So that is a traditional fall time or winter time pudding made in Italy. And it's very unique. It's one of those things that if you tasted it, you'd probably love it. But if they tell you what's in it, you definitely don't want it. So Sanguinacho Donche is a pudding that has all kinds of stuff we're used to that we like. It's got milk and cream. It's got pine nuts, cinnamon. It has hints of almond. And then they sometimes use this really neat little ingredient called vin cotto. So vin cotto is where they take the must from the grapes pressed to make wine, and they cook it down to where it has the texture of a balsamic glaze. And it's got a really nice depth to it. It's very similar in flavor to a balsamic, but without all of that vinegar bite. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous product. So all that being said, the thickening agent in this particular custard pudding in the US or in other cultures, we might use eggs or flour. Italy uses blood. So it was a very easy tie-in for the Hannibal show. It was a very interesting idea to me to try and take this and make this into a cocktail. Have no fear, there's no blood in this cocktail. So what I did was I pulled out all of the base flavoring ingredients from the Sanguinacho. So they use pine nuts, they use vanilla, and they use cinnamon. Those are across the board. There are regionality differences, but those are the three big ones. So I took those three things and infused whiskey. I really wanted something that would stand up to those flavors and carry them forward really well. So I also chose a blended Texas whiskey that I like called Texas Ranger. It has these really nice vanilla notes without being too sweet. So that was my base. I infused it with all of those things, and I call it Quid whiskey, as in quid pro quo. That is the name of our cocktail, because that is one of the lines from Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. So I took that, and then I took all of the other ingredients that are in the pudding and found their alcoholic counterparts. So it usually has some form of chocolate. So I used creme de cacao. It usually has almond extract, so I swapped it out for amaretto. And then I did want to add in that milk because it is supposed to be a dessert. This is a dessert cocktail. And what I chose to do was scald the milk. So it isn't necessary. You can do this without scalding the milk. Scalding the milk denatures the proteins, kills all that bacteria, and actually kind of sweetens the milk in this really subtle way. And I thought it did a lot nicer with the cocktail. If you want to go super crazy, take the ingredients I infused the whiskey with, add them to the scalded milk and let them infuse and just double up on that flavor. So that being said, this whole pig's blood pudding dessert thing, I'm turning it into a cocktail, but there's no pig and there's no blood. But we will get to that. I'll show you where I brought that in at the end as a tribute instead of as an ingredient. So for this shaker tin, you are going to need 1 ounce of your Quid whiskey, your infused pine nut, vanilla, cinnamon whiskey, which, by the way, this is just such a fantastic flavor combination. I was really happy after I did this experiment. This might be just an infusion I keep at my bar all the time, I think, from the future. So we do 1 ounce of that. This is a lower proof cocktail because it is dessert and it's sweet, but I wanted all the flavors to shine. I tried amping up the alcohol, but then the milk was an issue and then the flavor started to die out here and there. So we're only using 1/4 ounce of creme de cacao. And you can use the brown or the white. It's just going to alter your color a tiny bit because it's just 1/4 ounce. But I like to use the clear. And then I have amaretto, also 1/4 ounce. Go ahead and put that. And then I'm going to use this vincoto. So I realize vincoto is not something sitting on everybody's bar or in everybody's kitchen. I honestly didn't have it before experimenting with the cocktail. It is not something I'm able to regularly find in my grocery store. If you have an Italian or European-centric grocery store, you might be able to find it. But I found this on Amazon, and it was like 10 or 11 bucks. And it goes so far. It keeps forever in your fridge. It's great for salad dressings. It's great on fruit, on yogurt. I put it on Italian burgers last week. It was phenomenal. So buy it for the cocktail. Use it for a ton of other things. We're going to use 1/4 ounce of our vincoto. Just keep in mind that if it has been in your fridge, it's going to be a lot more viscous. It's going to seem thicker just because of that temperature change. So you want to make sure you get all of that in there. Simple as that. And then if you've done these with me before, you know that when I do dairy cocktails, I have this weird OCD thing where I like to ice my shaker before putting in the milk. It's just kind of this like extra step I do to try and help it not curdle. But when your ratios are appropriate, alcohol to dairy, it won't curdle. So I'm going to go ahead and ice my shaker anyway. And then I'm going to add in 1 ounce of my scalded milk. And we're going to give this pretty hefty shake. Mainly because we really want that vincoto to incorporate, but we also just want all those flavors to get nice and aerated, that milk to get a little bit of froth. We're going to shake it for about 15 to 20 seconds. So for those of you who aren't making this along with me, or like, I don't know if I want to make all this, I want you to think about this cocktail tasting like the best version of a cross between like adult yoo-hoo and adult chocolate milk. They don't always taste the same. And then it's boozy. So it's really, really tasty. So I'm going to strain this up, which means without ice, directly into my cocktail glass. I have this beautiful little Nick and Nora style glass that I found for like 50 cents. Made me so happy. And now usually bartenders really love to fill their cocktail glass all the way to the brim, also known as the wash line. I specifically picked this one. It's about 1/4 ounce short of the capacity. So there's a little bitty line there. And that's because what I'm going to do for the garnish, I want it to sit in the drink a little bit to cover but also be in the drink, and I don't want it to go too far. So to bring that pork element, because we're not doing the blood, we're not putting blood in cocktail. It's not that crazy. But I have prosciutto, because I love salty and sweet. Keeps it within that pork element that the blood is from in the actual Sanguinacho Donche. So I'm going to take this prosciutto, make a little prosciutto snack or a little rosette. Doesn't have to be too fancy. I'm going to skewer it, but it doesn't matter. We're going to amp it up and turn this into an entire dessert. This is not just a dessert cocktail, guys. This is an entire dessert right now. So we have that prosciutto sitting in there, and then we're going to take an orange and do just a tiny bit of zest. Primarily focusing on the prosciutto. If any gets on the drink, that's fine. Primarily focusing on that. And then we're going to bring that chocolate element back and do just a tiny bit of shaved chocolate. And that is the Quid Pro Quo, otherwise known as Chef Chandler's crazy bar dessert. But let me tell you, this combo, like you didn't even know you could have it that good. And then you drink this and you're like, where's it been my whole life? So thank you for joining me on the last, very sad to say, spooky themed pandemic pinup happy hour edition. But next week, we'll be doing Dia de los Muertos, which I'm super excited about. I'm going to tell you guys a bunch of different really cool things about that particular day, which has to do with Mexican culture. And I'm really hoping you guys come into the Zoom room and tune in and play with me, because I'm going to be teaching how to do the different types of mariachi gritos. So it should be really fun. But before I sign off, I just wanted to remind anyone out there that is watching, there is a giveaway on the Instagram account. So pop on over. I usually post the recipes from the class by Monday or Tuesday. But the giveaway is very simple. You just make one of my cocktails and let me see it. Put it on Facebook, tag me, or Instagram, and tag me in it so I can see it. And that's all it is, pretty much. And I will send you these really neat little cards. I designed these bingo cards that go along with one of my fall classes in November called Dysfunctional Family Bingo. Not functional, just dysfunctional. Dysfunctional Family Bingo. Just kind of as a parody of Thanksgiving and some of the struggles that come along with also the holiday loveliness that we like. But we all know it's never smooth going. So if you would like to play bingo, you can tune into that class, but you can also just get your own little bingo card by, and recreating one of my cocktails. I love seeing what you guys do with my stuff. It just warms my heart. And if you take it and try something absolutely out of the park or wild left field with it, I'm happy with that too. So until next Sunday, this has been a very spooky month. I hope you guys enjoy Halloween, and I will see you next week.